In one of our earlier sessions, perhaps at peace in Oroville, we had discussed the role of renunciation and purification in yoga. Sri Aurobindo had summed up the roles in a picturesque language, saying that if renunciation is the left arm, purification is the right arm of the yoga of knowledge. Because renunciation is a negative element. It is not enough that you renounce things. Even if you renounce riches, if you renounce relations, if you renounce attachments, all that you do is to dispossess yourself, even with the utmost sincerity, taking it for granted that what you renounce outwardly, externally, you do not cultivate internally by dwelling upon through your mind and senses, assuming that the renunciation is true and entire. It is a negative step. It is not enough, and no edifice can be built, but especially a spiritual one, on negative bricks. The negative elements remove certain obstructions, cut knots that tie you down to lower nature, external, extrovert nature. But it has to be followed up by more positive elements, the most important of which is purification. Unless we purify our nature, purify our mind, heart, life energies, and even physical system, it is idle to expect that the higher consciousness or the deeper consciousness can for any length of time dwell in us, much less function. And to purify, it is not a process of one step or two steps, because man is a multiple being. Man is not just mind alone, or soul alone, or heart alone. As we have seen, he is made up of a number of principles of existence, number of formations, each of which expresses its opposite principle. So, part by part, limb by limb, we have to build up the purification. And today's chapter deals with the purification of the lower mind. We have not one mind, we have the lower mind covering the action of the sense mind again into the receptive mind and the active sense mind. Then the mind, manas, that coordinates the reports of the senses, comes to its own conclusions. The reason comes along, thought forms. This operation of mental energy based upon sense data may call roughly the lower mentality. Now this has to be purified. But is there a thing in life that purifying one limb entirely and you next go to another part? Man is an organic being. So what happens in one part naturally affects the other parts. Even if you succeed in purifying one part, say the heart, for instance, by a rigorous discipline based upon ethics or religion or morality, supposing you purify your mind, which decides things, it is not unoften that you are suddenly invaded by impulses and rushes from the vital. You become uncentered by invasions from outside. That is because the doors are open in other parts of the being. So, in a sense, no perfection of one part can be perfect, no purification can be perfect unless all other parts are also purified. So it is not a logical process of going from one part to another, but laying stress upon one part that is most open, that gives you the lead, and simultaneously extending that purificatory movement on other parts in a subsidiary way. So what is done, what is achieved, what is worked out in one part has always to be done in the context of the various other parts of the being. There is no such thing as purification of this part first and purification of that part next. Though for purposes of our understanding, we can go step by step. And today we take up the purification of an instrument which is the most important for man. Man is a mental being, and in spite of the fact that he lives in a body which is activated by a life force, it is ultimately the mind that decides what the man is. It is the functioning of the mind that decides the level at which he lives, how the body is put to use, how the life energy is made to work. All that depends upon the poise of his mind, upon the development of his mind. And therefore, for man at least, mind is the first instrument that should be taken up for purification. And mind, as we have seen, is an inner instrument. It is called, in Sanskrit, Antahkarana, the inner instrument. The inner instrument consists of buddhi, that is, intelligence and will, or intelligent will. Thereafter come the mind and the senses, the sense mind again, active and passive and so on. Now, this inner instrument with which we function is, if we observe dispassionately, at the mercy of what Sri Aurobindo calls the psychic prana. In other words, the desire, life influenced by desire, the life force which acts as the vehicle of desire. And this force, let us call it psychic prana as he calls, does not function only on the vital level. It has a mental coloring. The desire may originate anywhere, in the vital or in the life energies, but it succeeds in getting the assent of the mind. It gets a psychological color and infects the whole working of our system through our mind. You can call it the psychological prana, if you like, to make it more specific. And it is that brings about the vitiation in the whole working. If we think anything comes before me, for instance, do I look at it purely from the point of view of what it is? How is it made? The first reaction normally is, how will it be useful for me? Do I have it? Can I have it? And according to the situation, my assessment of the thing, my reaction of the thing depends upon what part it can play in my life. And that is, at bottom, desire to possess. If I don't have possession of it, how to get possession of it? In some way or other, we relate things that come before us to our desired self. And this is the main point of vitiation. As there is a truth behind everything in God's creation, there is a truth here also, though the truth has been deformed and perverted in its expression. The principle behind this psychic prana is possession, what Sri Aurobindo calls bhoga, enjoyment. Things are to be taken up and enjoyed. To put it crudely, they call it bhoga. But what is the divine intention? Bhoga as a principle has to be accepted even as yoga. But what is bhoga completely a negative or an inferior principle? The form we have given to that principle is deformation. Bhoga proceeds right from the plane of Ananda. It is a divine delight that pours itself out in a million forms so that the divine can enjoy itself in the form of another. Only this morning I was reading in the 11th book of Savitri, when I was commenting, how in the infinity the first whisperings of its innocent delight at the prospect of discovery, of seeking, of touching, it is accompanied by an enamored laughter to the rhythm of which the chanting words come into existence. Our very birth of the universe and the worlds are an outcome of an impulse originating in the divine being to put out things from himself in order that he can have a relation. Where there is only one, there is no enjoyment, there is only a self-absorption. So something in the divine is moved to put out things. The one becomes many, the one becomes the million, and the one starts having relation, discovering itself through various obstructions, through various instruments, discovers, establishes contact, gets union, and has the joy of recognition and pratyabhijna and union. Now this joy of discovery, this joy of enjoyment, of the delight of the divine, by the divine and for the divine, is the true principle of bhoga that underlies the action of the psychic prana. But where does the deformation come? The deformation comes in ego, which is a companion of our desire. Because there is a personal desire, we miss the cosmic enjoyment. Like air, like ether, the enjoyment is spread out all in the universe. We seek to appropriate things to ourselves individually. We fragment a thing. We seek to appropriate for ourselves. And there we cut across the scheme of God. Look at a person who has some developed consciousness, whose consciousness has got freed from these bonds of self-appropriation. Anything that he sees, anything that he sees, anything that appeals, it brings a joy to his face. His face becomes radiant. He sees children. He laughs. He doesn't think whether they are my children or my sister's children or brother's children. It's just the innocence of the child. It brings laughter and joy bubbling up in him. To that extent, his consciousness is not involved in the grossness of life. The desire has not mixed with it. It is to eliminate, demarcate, expel this element of desire, self-appropriating desire from the psychic prana, which runs throughout the mind, the vital and the body, that the purificatory discipline is intended. We miss bhoga, the divine bhoga, because we seek to personalize, to appropriate individually what is meant for the divine. And how to get out of desire? It is easy to say don't desire, but desire itself is a big word. There is a divine desire, there is a creative desire, there is a human desire. We are at the moment speaking of human desire. And this human desire has to be got rid of, has to be narrowed down till it is dissipated completely by acquiring control over our physical and psychic prana. Behind desire, there is a will. After all, what moves a desire? In my own small petty way, I have a will, and that functions through desire. For the divine desire also, there is a divine will. There is one cosmic will which functions through the instrumentation of desire. And the first step in this purification is to get control over this desire. Normally what happens? The physical body, the physical formation desires things. Generally the physical body desires only creature comforts, physical pleasures, security and such things. At a higher level, the life force extends the field of its desire. It has ambition, it wants aggrandizement, it is not satisfied with only physical pleasures, it wants a vital pleasure of domination, vital pleasure of control, ruling over so many things, satisfaction of its wishes and imaginations. So the vital desire it is that really dominates the human being. Mind, though the Upanishads say mind is the leader, prana sharira neta of life and body, normally in our day-to-day life what happens is, it is the vital, that is the life force, the desire linked to the life force, that is the ruler, that decides, that colors our thinking, and mind is at the mercy of every vital invasion. This desire at the vital level has first to be got hold of, and the roles are to be reversed, by which instead of the vital dominating over the mind, precipitating the mind into any direction it chooses, it is the mind that must stand aloof. It is the mind that must decide in what way the vital shall function, in what direction the vital energies shall move. And for that, even in small matters, the mind should be cultivated. The mental will, to put it more definitely, the mental will must be strengthened. Even in small matters, once you decide to do a thing, that must be given a full operation. Whatever the inclinations of the body, whatever the inclination of the vital being, what the mind has decided That must be enforced. That way, new grooves are formed by which, in any situation, the mind first emerges and has a look at the situation, and we know to what extent we have to take interest in a thing, in what way we should deal with the situation. Left to things, nature rushes through the vital desire to vitiate every situation, and the mind is a camp follower. We spoke of the sense mind, the senses darting to objects, those which are impelled in the direction of objects in which it is impelled by the desire. There is the emotional part, the emotional mind, where we have got so many emotions, feelings and the like, and they are used to give habitual responses, again governed by desire, by habit. It is decided, nature, it is decided by nature. These contacts are helpful, these contacts are enjoyable, these contacts are unpleasant. So the emotional mind goes on giving standard responses. But that is not the final truth. That is because the previous working of mixed desire has already determined the terms into which we react emotionally to different situations. But is there a finality to these responses? Is what is pleasant always good? Is what is unpleasant always harmful? The moment we grow in our consciousness, we grow in our understanding, we rather see that the opposite is true. That what is normally very pleasant is rarely good. And what is normally we seek to avoid, it has some virtues in it. It has some contributive elements in it. That is why the Upanishads speak of Shreyas and Preyas. The good and the evil, the pleasant and the unpleasant. And what is good, what is spiritually good and spiritually bad. These are different terms. And we can revise, we can change our responses by putting pressure upon our desire being. If we cultivate this mental understanding that we are prisoners of habitual movements, then is it possible to begin to change our responses. For instance, we discussed the other day, perhaps in another class, how when you go to a play, a drama on the stage, the response to a scene of suffering is one of some enjoyment. How do we do that? Whereas the same situation, somebody suffering that in our own family, in our house, in life, it would bring tears to us. But there we enjoy it. How is it? That is because we are not involved personally. We know we are not affected, and we function at a different level, at taking the rasa of it, the sap of things, the taste of things. So there even grief, even hurt, it yields a certain rasa, to experience which we go all the way, purchase a ticket and sit. Even when we know a play is a tragedy, still there is more people go to tragedies to see Hamlet and Macbeth rather than Winter's Tale, perhaps. And it has an effect of catharsis. When you see a tragedy, when something in you responds and reacts the situation, and your being expands in that sensation, you are able to get out of the normal grooves of reaction of unhappiness to see scenes of suffering. That shows suffering has a part to play. Suffering has a part to play in the evolution of the soul. Very often, Sri Aurobindo has pointed out that the soul, human soul in its evolution, chooses suffering in order to progress the hard way and the quicker way. It is like physical exercise, physical culture, where if we do only light exercises which don't pull our muscles too hard, we take time to build up our body. But if we make a habit to choose the harder exercises, where we get initially some pain, but it is more exacting, then we build up our muscles sooner. So very often the soul chooses the way of suffering in order to progress more rapidly. The outer human mind does not know it, and it tries at times to remedy the situation by committing suicide, not knowing that it is the soul's choice. And if even in cases of such suicide, where being tired or being misdirected by hostile forces, people commit suicide, in the next birth the soul will again choose the same kind of circumstances, because it has been tricked, it has been denied its choice. This is by the way. The point is that it is possible to change our reactions to things once we get away from the interfering desire. And this desire is shot through and through our psychic prana, which influences from the physical body right up to the mind. Even the higher our thoughts are subconsciously colored and pulled here and there by the cords of desire. We have, as I said in the beginning, a passive mind, a passive sensational mind, and an active dynamizing mind. Now it is the passive part of the sense mind that is at the mercy of all contact from outside. Anything that comes and impinges upon it, it reacts. If we take care to separate the desire element in our prana from the operations of this sense mind, the sense mind is indifferent to many contacts, to many impacts. It doesn't react at all. It doesn't run after things that are likely to give pleasure. It is dark, it is solemn, and it does not run unless we consciously impel it to do. There is, corresponding to this passive part of the sensational mind, there is the dynamic part which exerts itself to get things. Now, if desire is not there, the desire has been purified, and we have taught ourselves not to seek things for our own enjoyment, for our own bhoga, but for the divine, for the larger self, then the very nature of the functioning of this impulsive mind undergoes a change. It weighs, it judges before it goes into action. Everywhere, right from the lowest strata of mind to the reasoning mind, there is this intermittence of psychic prana, the desire. Even in the physical desire, there is this psychological desire mixed up, because man is essentially a psychological being, and whatever work he does, whatever emotions he expresses, whatever thoughts he thinks, behind is the influence of this psychic prana. If we take steps, by sedulously watching our steps, our movements, rejecting at every step things that are dictated by desire, that are moved by desire, Maybe we are very charitable when it concerns ourselves to say that after all these are innocent desires. That's true. Desires may be innocent, but it is 100 such innocent desires that activate and build up a body of desire in us. And unless we start in a small way, it is impossible to expect that we will be in a position to eliminate desire from our being. It is like saying, mother was always saying that we will tell small falsehoods. When it really comes to test, we will be able to tell the truth. But once the habit is formed of reacting in a lie, even for small things, then it develops that for the sake of telling a lie, people tell a lie. With which we are very familiar. People joke. And when they are asked afterwards, I say, no, it is just for the fun of it. Nobody gains. But that lower vital part enjoys it. To tell a lie, to be cunning, to cheat, to deceive, all these are expressions of one particular part of the lower vital. It becomes a habit so much so that even when we don't stand to gain anything, just for the pleasure of it, they will go on spreading some things. This is why Mother and Sri Aurobindo have vehemently objected to gossip. We know when each item of gossip is taken up for scrutiny and you go on tracing how it has come, ultimately you find there is a big zero. Things develop. Mouth to mouth they gather force, gather volume. And it is for this purpose that the mother said, gossiping has been an enemy, a special enemy of our spiritual progress in the ashram. The asura has used this gossiping mentality to deviate human consciousness towards an anti-divine goal. Once the wall of goodwill, benevolence, charity, understanding is broken through such activities of the lower vital, like gossip, scandal mongering, the door is open to the entry of the hostile forces, which denude the persons who talk, the persons who hear, of the least elements of goodwill, without which no divine life is possible. Everywhere it is this desire, even in gossip. What is the desire? To condemn somebody, to put down somebody, so that in effect you rise above. You have a feeling of satisfaction that I am superior, he is inferior. You go on condemning. Whether other people believe that you are superior or not is another matter. They ultimately believe that both are inferior. But the havoc is done. This personal desire to show off, personal desire to aggrandize at the expense of others, this has been at the havoc on every plane, material plane, mental plane. My ideas, my ideology, my teaching, my guru, they are the best. Monopoly, truth is my monopoly, not yours. My teaching is the best. Everywhere, the desire for superiority. It expresses itself on 100 levels in 100 forms. These are the areas where we have to apply the torch of purification. Wherever we have to take a torch and hunt for these hounds of desire in every part of our being. And that is the first self-discipline. We have to be severe with ourselves, charitable to others, as Mother said. And all this purification of this lower mentality is ultimately fruitful depending upon the support it receives from the purification of the higher mind. That is the higher mentality. We have to start at the lower hand, no doubt, but we have to go on supporting our action in the lower regions by light from above, by help from the higher regions. And that is where the purification of the higher buddhi comes. To discriminate, before we start purifying, we must know what is to be purified. We must learn to discriminate good things from bad things in ourselves. It is only when that window in our mind, thought mind is opened, when discrimination starts functioning naturally and spontaneously, that we will be guided to put our finger on the right spot. And that will be the theme of our next sessions, purification of the higher mentality. As we said, no purification anywhere can be complete without the purification everywhere. But we have to start somewhere. And for man it is easiest to start at the level where he is, and that is the level of the lower mentality. We have seen the province, we have seen the realm, but he needs a light, and that light he can get from his buddhi, from his intelligence, from his understanding, because man is essentially led by his understanding, however much colored it may be, by desire. That we will take up at our next session. What is pleasant and what is good, that itself is a big question. For a man whose consciousness is fixed below in creature comforts, greed for food, sex, comfortable life, certain things are pleasant. He says they are good and he searches after them. For a man who has developed a little higher consciousness, he finds these things are dissipating. They sap his energies, they kill his time, and he does not have the sense of development, the sense of progress. So for him, he says they are not good for me. So he says what a normal man on an ordinary level shuns as bad, as not welcome, they do contribute more to my progress, and he chooses that way. So what is normally pleasant turns out to be normally bad for the higher growth of the human consciousness, and the reverse. Everything has to be decided by the level of consciousness where he dwells. If I know certain things are good for me, I can't go and impose those standards on my maidservant. For her, certain things are good, and whether they are good for me or not, I shall not interfere. For her level of consciousness, that is nature's way. But when I know I have the consciousness and I am blessed enough to know that this thing is wrong and it will interfere with my progress, then if I go and choose that, that is wrong. This is what happens with most of the seekers. They know a thing is bad, they know a thing is wrong, but still they can't resist. They say this one time. Now this is what the Upanishads object, this is what the scriptures object. When it is shown to you, when your consciousness appreciates that this thing is bad, still if you go after it, it is rank insincerity. And where there is insincerity, there can't be spiritual progress, there can't be a spiritual breadth. And this inability to automatically distinguish from what is good and what is not good is rooted in our vital desire. It is the ego soul, the desire soul, that decides this is good for me, this is not, from its standards. The true judgment, the true assessment of things can come only from the soul, the psychic being, or a purified mind which is open to the influence and the light of the soul. There comes, and this mind cannot be open to the light of the soul unless it is purified of its dross of desire at every level. And the desire is the main culprit, and the main intention of purification is to get us rid of this deformation imposed by ego, to slowly thin out that entity called the desire soul, so that the true being, the true center, the true psychic being gradually comes and displaces the frontal ego and begins to function as the true leader of the journey of our life.
When we speak of greed on the physical level, is it something desire to go beyond the minimum requirements of...
Desire is different from need, though the lower vital and the mind given to the vital interpret things to their own advantage. They always take every desire to be a true need. And this ability to distinguish between need and desire itself can come only by a sustained action of purification. Desire is desire on whatever level it functions. For instance, a crude man, he has desire for food. He wants to eat. A child, you give anything, it tries to put in its mouth. That is a crude desire implanted by nature. A little higher developed, you don't care so much for desire as to get admiration from people, acquire control, influence over people. That is the vital desire, enjoyment. And then at the mental level, you have a greed for books. I have a bit of it. You have a greed for books, you have a greed for knowledge. You want everything immediately. Not for so much sake of spiritual growth. But you see a book and something leaps out from you. I should have that book. I should read that book. Why? It is a desire. Many of us have got this disease. You see a nice book, you see an advertisement of 15 books for 20 rupees. Immediately there is a tendency, let us have it. But why? How is it going to contribute? My teacher used to always ask me, whenever I see an advertisement, I would say, let us have it. But he said, what are you going to do with it? How is it going to help you? Then I recognized, yes, this is also a desire and a greed. Greed for books. You, in our place here, keep anything for free distribution. One sheet, blank sheet you can keep. You will see immediately a queue forming. Yes, they will stand for half an hour, pick up the paper and go. And even the first man shows there is nothing here, still they will come. Greed. This is greed. It may be today for chocolate, for flesh, for wine, for books. And it is greed that mother said, I have written somewhere, it forms. It is at the root of tumor. So when somebody died, a mother said once that it is greed. Then I remember, some of us would recognize the person who came a little earlier. The another person was there, he was He, he had brain, a tumor in the brain. He died. Then I got intrigued how this man is not an intellectual, he was not a scholar or anything. His brain had no greed. I asked mother, how did he die? How do you explain why did the tumor come to his brain? She said he had ambition. Ambition to spread the teaching, to become a guru and that kind of thing. That also is a greed. Greed comes where we try to acquire a thing for which we have no true need. Take just the thing that we need and give to others. There is no greed. But tomorrow I will need it. Day after tomorrow I may enjoy it. You want keeping, that is greed. Greed at any level. Greed even for spiritual progress. Greed. They want to storm the kingdom of God by violence. You see, they do austerities. They do many things because they want. That is, even spiritual wealth, even spiritual gain, even spiritual progress can be gobbled up by the lower vital. And they become all these kinds of gurus whom you see abroad and around. Greed. Anything is fair enough. Even spiritual gains are prostituted by the lower desire, which has never been got rid of. It lurks in so many forms and it keeps its individuality intact.
We try to avoid life with life, but ultimately we should discriminate between what would be wholesome for our general.
Yes, exactly. Discrimination you have to develop, and discrimination means there has to be sincerity. And each one knows what is sincerity. Where one is sincere and not sincere, there is not a dunce who does not know, I tell you. Everyone knows. There is something of a divine element in each person which puts its finger, this is right, this is not for you. We may pretend not to know, not to hear. We may say, no, it is a superstition, whatever it is. But everyone knows where he is sincere and where he is not sincere. And unless there is sincerity, discrimination can't function. Because already there is a prejudgment. Already our being has decided that this can't be good for me. This is not going to be of advantage to me. Where is the question of discriminating between right and wrong? That is why mother always insisted, when I once asked her, how am I going to know that this guidance is the correct guidance? I get so many guidances. How am I to know? She said, remove your likes and dislikes, your preferences and prejudices. Remove them from you and you will know this is the right thing. That is yoga ultimately.